Good morning, and welcome to our second ever PODSCast, brought to you by the Pods Association. We're super excited for you to join us this morning. My name is Monique Roberts. I'm the Executive Director of the Pods Association. I'm actually coming to you from New Orleans, Louisiana, where I'm attending the Louisiana Gas Association conference. So I was like, I wonder if people realize that I'm in a hotel room. And Luke reminded me that no one buys these lamps. They're only in hotel rooms. So everybody knew that I was already traveling. So really excited that everybody is here with us today. Real quick on PODS, the PODS Association, hopefully everybody is familiar with us by now. And if not, you definitely will be hearing a lot more about the association and all the cool things that we're doing here in our community of integrity, data, GIS, construction, everything that having to do with these long linear assets that we love, pipelines. So we're here today with a great group of people that are going to get into quite a bit around GIS and data, but know that our community is made up of a multitude of different people. We're not just GIS based, and we are here to support pipeline safety and innovation around pipeline safety. So whereas safety is paramount and it is our priority, we want to make sure that we are maintaining standards and ensuring visibility to all of those critical assets that are out there that help to power our country as well as the world. So with that, we're going to move directly into a quick safety moment, being that safety is such a key focus for us and what we do. Our safety moment today is about vehicles. So making sure that you park your vehicle in a safe place, making sure that you're in a well-lit area. Make sure to take your keys and any valuables that you have. It's just a very good rule to make sure that you don't leave any valuables out in the open so that it's to entice people to break into your vehicle, because there are a lot of break-ins that happen every year and cost a lot of money, and it's an absolute hassle. So you want to try to avoid that if at all possible. A few things with our housekeeping issues. We want to make sure that everybody participates in this podcast. So if you have any questions throughout, you can put those into the questions box. You can put them into the chat box as well, and we'll try to get to those as much as we can. We have a lot of information to cover today, so just want to make sure that if we don't get to your question, you do ask one. We for sure will follow up with you to make sure that we can get your questions answered. Also, we're going to have some polls throughout. So we want to learn about a little bit about you guys and the audience and what's important to you, and make sure that we speak to that as well. So please participate in the polls. And then finally, after the podcast is over, you're going to see a quick survey. So please tell us how we're doing and give us some good positive feedback if you don't mind. That way we can keep these going. Also, at the end of that survey, we're going to ask you guys to give us some suggestions on future topics as well. So if you want to get into a deeper dive from the information that you're going to be hearing today from our great panel, let us know, right? Give us that feedback in the survey, and we'll do some additional podcasts. In fact, our first one was so popular, we've already been asked to do a deeper dive on that one as well around data management. So you can see here a quick overview of our agenda, but I am not going to be talking about that today. We have some wonderful people to talk about that. And before you learn a little bit more about them, we want to learn a little bit more about you. So just said that we're going to have some polls. So we're going to start one real quick and launch that. So you're going to see a quick poll in a blue screen come up on your screen. So if you could tell us, what's your role related to PHMSA and NPS? Are you managing and submitting annual reports? Are you submitting to NPMS? Are you doing GIS work? There's so many things that are involved and so many roles that are involved in what we're going to be doing today. So if you could just go ahead and mark those on about what you're involved with, and you can choose more than one, because nowadays nobody's just got one job, right? We all wear multiple hats and do multiple things. So while everybody is voting there, I just want to remind you again, not remind you, say this, I don't think I said it yet, that we are recording this podcast. So once we're done, we're going to upload that onto our channel. So if anybody missed it, or if you think we covered some good information that one of your colleagues might be interested in, we're going to send you a link to our channel as well so that you can check that out afterwards. So with that, we have about 70% of you that have told us about what you do. So I'm going to share those results, and look at that. 70% of you, GIS and work management system, but we have quite a few people. Leigha, check that out. A lot of people that are submitting to NPMS and managing and submitting their annual reports as well. So this is great. Thank you very much for sharing this with us, and this is going to help our panel in guiding them about what we're going to be talking about today, specifically to you. So with that, I'm going to quit talking because I'm sure if you're hanging out or if you're involved with pods, you know that I already talk too much. So I'm going to hand it off and introduce or ask our panel to introduce themselves, and I'm going to kick it to Blaine first to tell us who he is, and thank you again, Blaine and Leigha and Luke, for joining us today. Go right ahead.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Blaine Keener. I'm the Director of the Operations System Division in OPS, the Office of Pipeline Safety. My division is responsible for NPMS and also for keeping our tabular data collections up to date with new regulations, as well as trying to make improvements where we can. The past few years, we've been trying to keep up with the new regulations. So there hasn't been a whole lot of general improvement, but a lot of changes to the tabular reports, the incidents, the accidents, and the annual reports. All that, the data quality and making sure we've got the forms updated is within the Operations Systems Division.
Awesome, Blaine. Go ahead, Leigha.
Hi, I'm Leigha Gooding. I'm the GIS manager at PHMSA, and I manage the NPMS system. And I work with Blaine on also integrating a lot of our GIS data with a lot of our tabular data, just for a holistic data view here at PHMSA.
Awesome. Thanks, Leigha. And last but not least, Mr. Luke Hutmacher.
Hey guys, Luke Hutmacher. I'm here as the technical coordinator for PODS, director of data management for Integratech, and I've been doing GIS implementations and migrations for enterprise pipeline companies for about 20 years. PODS, APDM, ISAT, all that stuff. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. So what we're going to do is, I know I just told y'all that I was going to stop talking, but I promise in just a second. I'm going to ask Leigha to start us off and giving us an overview of what NPMS is. And Leigha, you know, now that you've seen that we have just a wide array of people that attend these podcasts, you know, I think it'd be great if you could just level set us and give us that baseline about what you guys do.
Absolutely. The NPMS program is largely our GIS program at PHMSA. So it's all of our federal and contract personnel that have all the GIS and IT development skill sets, producing IT applications, mapping applications, performing spatial analysis, et cetera, to support inspection planning and engineering research, as well as emergency response and every other way you use GIS. But at the backbone of the NPMS is our pipeline database. And so the NPMS database, the pipeline database, includes the pipeline assets that are submitted by actually closer to 1,600 pipeline operating companies, or I should say different pipeline OPIDs every single year. It is in the regulations that operators of gas transmission and hazardous liquid need to make these submissions each year. And the regulations are listed here if you want to read up on those. The due dates are listed as well as March 15th and June 15th, depending on the type of pipeline asset. There's also a link here to the NPMS Operator Standards Manual. This is available on the NPMS website, and it really goes through all the attribute standards, the spatial standards, the legal things that need to be done to meet the requirements of an NPMS submittal. But a lot of people want some additional guidance, and that's why we also have the NPMS submission supplemental instructions. And this document, I'll mention it a few times while I speak today here, will really walk through different scenarios, tell you how you should handle a certain scenario on the ground in your data, and walks through a lot of the common questions that we receive on a regular basis. The last link here is for OSAFE, the Operator Submission and Validation Environment. And for the 32% of you that actually do NPMS submittals, you're probably pretty familiar with this system. I launched it quite a few years ago, but it's your one-stop place for everything NPMS for an operator. You can print off your submission history to prepare for an inspection. You can view your old data. You can QC your new data that has been published. You can also perform all of your submission activities here, whether you're uploading a new geospatial data submission to replace all of your old data, if you're just adding a lateral, or if you don't have a GIS system and you do have GIS data in the system from some years ago, and you just need to make a minor change, you can actually use a mapping environment to go in and mark up that change on the map. So the OSAVE system is someplace you'll be very familiar with if you do make NPMS submittals.
Awesome. And Leigha, you know, thank you for sharing some information with us. I want to make sure that everybody can see that we have these, your handout that you wanted to share with everybody. So if you go onto your little control panel, you can see that Leigha shared with us some supplemental instructions for your NPMS upload. So you want to grab that. And then Leigha, let me ask you this, like, how is PODS involved in the NPMS? Like, is the PHMSA, I know, is a member of PODS. So could you shed some light on that, on how we're connected?
Absolutely. Back in, I want to say 2011-ish, 2010, 2011, we actually migrated into a modified PODS database structure and database format. We use linear referencing. So actually it's your submittals that we use to help us identify how to update our pipe center line in our PODS database model and how to update all of our events throughout our database model. So yes, we've been PODS members for quite some time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, the baseline is there, right? I mean, if you're a PODS member, then you know you're already, I'm sorry, if you're uploading your NPMS to PHMSA, then you're already using PODS, right? So we have another poll question, and then I'm going to hand it over to Luke, who's going to get in the weeds. So it's Leigha. So how do you prepare, or how do you prepare your clients' data? So, you know, guys, what do you think, Leigha, Blaine? What do you think the answer is going to be here for how they prepare their data for submittal?
I think with all the GIS tools that are available today, I imagine there's a lot of automated processes and custom automated processes that are out there. But as with most automated GIS processes, you have to have an eye on things as well to manually check some things, make sure that things are happening the way you expect them to. So my money's on somewhere in between.
Okay. Well, we are right at about 60% of people that have voted. So I'll close the poll and we'll show what those results are. There we go. And yeah, Leigha, you need to buy a lottery ticket. Look at that.
I guess I will.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah. So are we.
Yeah, as all we are. So, okay, with that, we are going to jump into some processes. So, Luke, I'm going to hand the reins over to you, and if you don't mind, you and Leigha can walk us through her 5 steps for submittals.
Thank you. I want to appreciate that Monique made it this far without saying a joke about Luke and Leigha. Yeah, I got you now. So, like, let's just kind of set the stage for our next 20 minutes or so. I thought, let's talk about the process that goes from an operator making a submission to that submission being completed and approved. And we'll have Leigha describe that process, but probably more importantly is an opportunity for her to describe from the NPMS point of view where they spend the most amount of time, which corresponds with operators spending the most amount of time doing rework or communications or delays or that sort of stuff. So, you know, you only have so many people that can work on these every year, and you have a very specific deadline, and any opportunity you have to meet that deadline easier is going to be at least worth noting, right? This process is quite simple. The operator makes a submission. The NPMS team performs some initial QC. they provide feedback, and then it goes through an automated change detection tool, issue detection tool, and then it goes back and forth until we're submitted. But I think that if we were to make these blocks larger according to the amount of time, that second one, step 2, might be a little bit bigger, just because that initial set of back and forth is probably taking some time. So Leigha, you know, I'll let you talk about this, and then we can step through the next couple slides of a handful of items that you guys have identified that would help everybody from your point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree. Step 2 is a place where we spend a lot of our time. It's also a place where we find the issues that make the operators waste a lot of their time. So I feel that this is a place where we have a number of different people who specialize in different parts of the database and specialize in understanding different parts of PHMSA records. And they'll take a different view on the data and identify items that they know will be a problem. This includes actually reviewing the operator's submission history. We have documented records of the types of issues operators have every year. So we know what the weaknesses were last year, what to look out for, and we really develop a customized QC routine for this step 2 area. So there's definitely a lot of our time here, but when the operator takes the time and manages their data in a way, which we'll talk about more in a minute, where they can provide all of the information that needs to be provided up front, all the information that is asked for, all the other reports to PHMSA. This step not only goes smoothly for us, but we don't have to stop and contact the operator with a very long email describing in a lot of detail exactly what's going on and what the possible scenarios are, what the corrections need to be, or resubmitting data. We don't have to come back to the operators and ask them to retroactively find answers to so many of these questions.
That's a threat.
Yeah,
that long email is a threat.
Yeah, a bigger threat. We do share them with state inspectors, federal inspectors. We do want inspectors to understand, not to be mean, but you know, everything is an indicator of safety culture. So when they understand, it's not just that this regulation is not being met, but this operator doesn't have clear enough data records or data management processes to understand what's going on enough to report this to us. And I, as a GIS person, think that's very important. And so we do share that information throughout our inspection community as well.
Well, and later on, Blaine and I are going to talk about some of the additional attributes that directly correlate to consequences, right? High consequence areas, for example. So if you're looking from a risk management point of view, you're identifying threats and the consequences of that threat. And they all kind of relate to incomplete data, bad data, inconsistent data. You know, us GIS can't help it. We can't help ourselves. Everything's got to fit into a certain box, and if it doesn't, it gives us a problem. You did mention that, so we have like change detection tools, but you do a lot of work before it gets into automated processing. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have found, you know, as everybody, we're learning as we go, refining our process as we go, and 1,600 different ways of compiling a data submission and maintaining data leaves us seeing a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different weaknesses in different places. So one of the things that we've learned is that when we do more upfront manual QC, just to identify the types of things that we know this particular operator may have had problems with in the past, certain types of changes that we're expecting based on our management of inspection unit boundaries, based on the National Registry notifications that may have been submitted. If we identify those large issues up front, it actually makes our change detection process go a lot easier. So a lot of the longer emails that some operators may receive, that's probably coming from step 2. And when we get to step 4, and I'll talk a little bit about an overall of change detection, definitely want to tell people about how that works. A lot of those emails are coming from the step 2, and everybody, you know, all the analysts try to write them in the nicest and most detailed way possible. Like they are very detailed emails. We put a lot of time in them. We make screenshots. We try to show people examples of the types of issues we're seeing. But the idea is not just, hey, you messed up, like fix your NPMS submission. Like we really hope operators are taking these long emails and details back to reconsider how they can improve their data management systems, not just to make their NPMS submittal process easier next year, but just to improve data in-house altogether. So it helps us, it helps them. It's not just a punishment or a wag of the finger. Like, we just want everybody to improve their systems for everybody, for all of our stakeholders.
You're managing how many hundreds of thousands of miles of assets every year that come in, and you're doing
yeah, well, in the NPMS over 500,000 miles, but you can imagine how many little segments given each one.
Well, there's, you know, we're being recorded, and there's about 150 people on here. If you want to name and shame anybody, I'm just kidding. Monique,
I'm looking at
sorry, her eyes got real big with that one.
I'm like, no, don't.
So, I mean, you guys want to start?
You know who you are, I don't have to.
Maybe we should go in and start getting into the details now about, you know, some of the things that we think might just kind of help the whole process as a whole, make the pie smaller instead of bigger. Is that, Monique, you want to hop on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Or Leigha, I don't know if you had anything else to add on here.
I can talk about change detection on the next slide. If you want to move forward, that's fine.
And reminder that there are people ask questions, chat, any more details. We may not have time for everything. We're happy to take any questions or comments. There might be some as we get into some of these details here.
Yeah, and we actually do have one already. It says, are operators required to adhere to NPMS requirements, or are NPMS submissions required? I'm not sure if I understand that question.
If I'm understanding the question, it is in the safety regulations that are linked on the earlier slide that operators of gas transmission, hazardous liquid, and LNGs must submit this information each year. As well, there's a separate regulation that states that the same assets must be reported under the same operator ID on different reporting methods. So if that pipeline is on your annual report, that pipeline is your NPMS submittal, and that pipeline uses that same OPID on accident incident reports.
Yeah, okay, great, that makes sense.
To a couple of the points that we're going to talk about, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Monique. So let's jump into this. I see 4 things on here. One of them seems like one that's confusing to people, to me, probably number 4. But Leigha, go ahead and, you know, just kind of chat about some of these things.
Yeah, no problem. I'll actually start at number 1. This is the revision code attribute, the attribute that tells us how this pipeline has changed since the previous year. I think this is really critical to have this accurate in your submittal. It's going to save you a lot of time in the long run, because this really plays into our change detection process. And I won't go too far into what change detection process is, all of the custom tools that we've developed. It's probably another conversation for another day. But at the highest level, we just, it's a series of iterative geospatial and attribute comparisons and analyses that match every incoming segment from your pipeline submission to its counterpart in our current production database. So it may be matching to a pipeline that you previously submitted the year before, and your revision code indicates that there was only a spatial change because you re-GPS the line and cleaned up the geometry and the accuracy a little bit. It may match to a pipeline submitted by a different operator last year. And this is where we step in and start validating divestiture notifications and et cetera, make sure that we understand who the pipeline was operated by, who the pipeline is operated by now, and that decision is accurate before we update our database. It may have multiple matches. This also identifies missing pipelines a lot. So the change detection tool then takes all of that information, goes through a series of use case scenarios and classifies all the scenarios and states what they think the scenario is, they being change detection, gives it a confidence level, and then the analyst comes in and reviews some of the scenarios and lower confidence levels to figure out, do we need to go back to the operator again and ask them if something is missing, if something's accidentally duplicated. It looks like you acquired a pipeline from this operator, but there's no record in your NPMS submittal or your national registry notifications of an acquisition. What's going on here? So if you actually keep track of your revision code or the intended revision code, is it new construction being added to your database? Is this a pipe that you acquired? Is this a pipe that you just spatially modified because you're doing some data cleanup? If you keep track of that as you're going throughout the year, it's much easier to submit it accurately the first time than for you guys to retroactively go research what should have been the correct revision code had I captured it at the moment. So that's my biggest recommendation there. I'll touch on the other ones quickly. Acquisition changes in operatorship. On the right is an image from our OSAVE tool. It's important to tell us about these. Mention it. You don't have to list every single unique identifier on the pipeline, but just say, hey, the pipeline's in this county, divested to this OPID. It's going to give us the information we need to connect the dots so we don't bother you to help us connect the dots and to do more research. Always account for those missing pipelines, because when you operated it last year and you suddenly don't operate it this year and we can't find any explanation for it, we're going to contact you to do more research. So avoid that situation and check for these before you do your submissions. And the match with the annual report mileage. Since we have that regulation where you have to submit the same pipes for the same OPID on all the reporting methods, we do check the NPMS submittal mileage against the annual report mileage. It's one of our earliest red flag tests to indicate that we've got an error on one of these two systems right now. So do that check first, and you will pass that first big red flag where a lot of operators get caught.
I mean, a lot of operators, these are two different groups of people making these submissions between annual report and NPMS. And there's some indicators that they're doing it from two different sources sometimes. So any opportunity for these groups to get together internally to double check that is probably worth the time.
I agree. I see this hopefully not as an annoying thing, but as a great opportunity to make sure that if you do currently still have a system that's separate, that you're doing your annual reports from one database and you use spatial from another database, this is a great opportunity to make sure that you're in sync. I would make that an early year task every year. Get together, run some comparisons. The way that we do our comparisons, so you understand what we're looking at. The image actually at the bottom of this screen shows an example here. We compare the mileage per system type, per state, and per interstate status. So your gas pipelines in Wyoming that are interstate pipelines, if it's not within 5% of the miles that you submitted on the same annual report, red flag, we have come back to you, gotta do the research. You probably have your annual report people fixing people, your GIS people fixing things. So a good time saver to get together before March 15th, June 15th.
And those are both those dates are the same for both companies or for both submissions, right?
Correct. So yeah, all the gas transmission annual reports and NPMS at the exact same time, June 15th. LNGs are there as well. Your hazardous liquids are, I just said June 15th, sorry. That first one's March 15th, June 15th for your hazardous liquids. So they are synced. So when you're both submitting by that date, you should have both already spoken and compared your mileages at that point. It'll make it smoother for you.
That's interesting. I'd be curious to see what percentage match, just because every time I add two spreadsheets up, I think that it's like 5% that they match. So I can imagine that being a bit of a back and forth, kind of probably more often than not.
It certainly is. It's also, I feel like it's just the low hanging fruit. I feel like an operator can easily look for that, and it's low hanging fruit that, hey, something's off here. We got to go look further. Because it's not
outside of my organization,
person to do.
Numbers don't match.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next. We've only got 120 slides to go, Monique.
Yeah, we're only a 10th way through. No, we have another question.
Items. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah. So related to number one, so we built a pipeline last year and had an revs CD of C. Well, you can tell I'm not used to this. I was told we could. I was told we could submit a no change this year without updating the revs CD. Is this correct?
Yes, this actually is correct. We have systems and tools in place that we run when you do a no change. that we can update those values in that unique scenario. I want to warn, don't extrapolate that scenario to a lot of situations, but it's very confusing to tell an operator to say, hey, you have to tell us what changed this year. Technically nothing changed other than the fact that it's no longer new construction. So when it comes to the revision codes changing for that type of scenario, our systems can handle that.
Cool. Awesome. That's it for now.
Good. Keep those questions coming. All right, so the next group here, let's go, Leigha, go ahead and take it away and chat about these.
Sure. I think number 5 is pretty self-explanatory. Who wants more segments than you need to have? So minimize that segmentation when none of the attributes are changing. We don't require, we are not networked in a, it's not a networked database where you have to always intersect it at a pipeline intersection. If the attribute is changing, you have to intersect the pipe. Accurately describe your company and the submission. This actually, the image on the one side of the slide here, also from OSAVE, from the questionnaire section, explains how we asked 2 separate questions. One of them says, select the type of NPMS pipelines this OPID operates. Do you operate both? Do you operate only gas? Do you operate only liquid? Separate from the second question, which asks what type of pipes are in this submittal. And the reason why this is important is particularly for those operators who operate both. So we have a good chunk of them. You are required to submit your gas transmission submittal in March, but your hazardous liquid submission could come in March or it could come later in June. So we have to be able to route your submission properly to know if you're going to make another submission in a few months. Should we be looking for the gas and the liquids, etc.? So it's an important question that may need to be read twice. If you think you're answering the same question twice, read it twice. You're not. Know what to expect before you start. I can admit, if I were an operator and I jumped into OSAVE, then I realized all these questions that I had to answer and then had to stop and I had to go do my research and to come back and start over again, that would be very annoying. There are demo videos on the NPMS website, the OSAVE page, that tell you what these questions are going to be. You can also see this in the documentation for OSAVE and supplemental instructions. Know what you need to know before you go, and it will be much easier for you to get through that process. What's the last one here? Oh, yeah, don't misrepresent a pipeline as abandoned. Like, be aware that the PHMSA regulations recognize abandoned as being a permanent out of service status. This isn't, I'm temporarily not using the pipeline now, I might in the future, I might sell it. This is permanently abandoned in place. So don't accidentally say a pipeline's abandoned when it's not. We end up having to work with inspectors, and inspectors have to come ask you questions and figure out if these pipelines are abandoned. So it's much easier to be very careful when reporting something as abandoned.
Yeah, and I know that the operational status discussion for every company that's ever implemented pods has turned into quite an ordeal. And it's because everybody has different descriptions or definitions internally for what those statuses mean, and they don't necessarily translate to an external report. And that goes with the state, Texas Railroad Commission, US, local, all that stuff is different, and it can get a bit confusing. Also, I was thinking about the OSAVE process. If I would go into that and make a submission and successfully get through that entire form, I would be like, all right, I did it, I hit go, shut my computer off and think that I was done. And I think that it might, for someone doing that the first time, it might catch them off guard when they get an email saying, you still have some problems here, but these are problems that OSAVE was not checking for, so you got to go back in. So understanding that just getting it to submit is not necessarily the end of the process for you. So all of the stuff that we got to up until this point are helping get through OSAVE quicker, but also get through the verification and finalizing all that stuff. And then on number 5, the unnecessary segmentation, I think we're going to get into that a little bit more. However, for GIS people and old school pipeline like APDM PODS people, we're talking about dynamic segmentation. right? Every time an attribute changes, you're going to have a new record here. But that can get awful large. Anybody that's run a risk calculation across the organization that deals with 100 different risk parameters and 1,000 miles of pipe, that might turn into 150,000, thousands and thousands of segments. That's not necessary, right? We can do some cleanup and dissolving, make that and simplify that a lot. So, Monique, I don't know if you had any other questions or if there's any other comments on this.
Just one more question that came in. So what if the pipe is replaced? Do you need a segmentation?
What was the second part? If the pipeline's replaced, do you need a what?
Segmentation.
Oh, okay. There's a couple ways that scenario could play out. If you have replaced a pipeline and it's going into the same ditch, I can tell you that it's not currently, with the current standards, not what Blaine's going to talk about in a few minutes. It does not get labeled as new construction. We label our new construction as new mileage being added to the network. So we would use that pipeline segment to update the pipeline segment that it replaced. Now, if you left a pipeline segment in place abandoned and then built your new one next to it, that's a situation where you're going to have to handle the revision code separately. Even if you don't submit the abandoned line, you just submit the new line and it is marked as new construction, we're going to see a previously operational line in that same place. And once we verify that that was abandoned because maybe you had not submitted it because it was not required previously, we're actually going to retain that in our database and mark it as abandoned on your behalf and mark the other pipeline as new construction. So yes, in order to have the correct attributes, as we talked about, segmentation is driven by attributes. When does an attribute need to change? In order to have the correct revision code, there are a lot of scenarios where you're going to have to segment uniquely in those situations. But if you look at the supplemental instructions and on the different steps of the supplemental instruction side, you don't have to go back. It actually, we call out sections of the supplemental instructions where you can read more about the checks and the processes at that individual step. And there's a lot of helpful information there to help you figure out how to handle certain scenarios on the ground in your data submission. They can be helpful for the questioner.
Cool.
And
awesome.
There's a decent amount of documentation out there around those different scenarios. Just in the tutorials and videos, you know, when do you do what and what do you do? These different reroutes and new pipelines and abandonments definitions. So there's definitely information out there. And if anyone sees, this is kind of a standing pod sport. If anyone finds information where pods can help by developing documentation or processes and stuff, please reach out to Monique. She will do it. Right?
What? No.
No.
I will have a call to action from our membership, all of our wonderful volunteers that are way smarter than me, and they will do it.
Maybe it's just not worth the effort. So Monique has called this a fireside chat with Blaine, and I think that, you know, we want to spend a few minutes chatting about some of the changes in the attribute requirements. And this is going to directly relate to the segmentation and eventually how that data is verified after it comes through OSAVE. And I think that some of that stuff there's still going to be questions on how that works, how that's going to be implemented. But I would just, again, from the pods point of view, point out this is all data that's stored within pods or typically stored within pods, because these represent pipeline regulatory information and processes, and your company is calculating class and HCAs and MCAs. So this data should be in your system of record, whether that be pods or something else. We hope that it's pods, but it's there. You've got a location to store all this data, and that opens the door for automation of these processes to get through some of those early hurdles of initial formatting and manual calculations and all that stuff. So Blaine, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of talk about how this big list of attributes and dates and all that stuff is possibly confusing some people. And maybe you can spend a few minutes talking about how we got to where we are and some of the history behind this in that. And you'll probably get 50 questions about this from me.
Yeah, sure. I'll get started then. My earliest notes about expanding the number of attributes collected through the NPMS, those notes were from November of 2013, so nearly 10 years ago. In 2014, PHMSA published a first Federal Register notice where we proposed collecting a lot more attributes than what is on the list. And then there was many more comments from industry, additional Federal Register notice, comments from industry, more Federal Register notice. Eventually, and surprisingly, in January of 2020, OMB said approved. So we were kind of surprised because we didn't, OMB can be that way. You never know when they're going to get around to making a decision or what the decision's going to be. And when they approved it in January of 2022, it has a January 31st, 2023 expiration date. We took a look at the amount of work that would be required both on our end and on the operator's end to make the systems available to or capable of handling all that segmentation, all the additional attributes. And we looked at our current NPMS contract and its expiration date and other administrative things and said, okay, we need more time. It's going to take us longer to be ready to accept these attributes in our systems. We need to build in time to offer educational opportunities to operators about what they're going to need to do in their system to be able to collect these additional attributes. So the reporting year that you see on the left-hand side, if you look at the approval that OMB gave us, the reporting years were much earlier in most cases, and we're saying, okay, we're not going to be ready to collect these new attributes. I believe it's calendar year 2026 and calendar year 2027 data for the brand new ones, and the calendar year 2023 data for the previously optional fields that become mandatory.
Blaine, would you mind, we had a couple of questions and making sure that everybody understands, because again, don't forget we have a wide array of people that are here. So can you explain the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and what that means, right, and why we were surprised and there?
Oh, well, whenever we propose to change an information collection, whether it's an annual report, an incident report, or the NPMS, there's a series of Federal Register notices that are required. And at the end of that Federal Register process, the Office of Management and Budget has to review the proposed changes and either say, yes, go ahead and make those changes to your information collection, or OMB might say, no, you can't make those changes to your information collection.
Thank you for clarifying, Blaine.
And I mean, every change comes with a resource cost, whether that be an amount of time to make the change, amount of money to pay for it, right? Or a number of resources to execute those changes. And this is significant in my mind. While these attributes are very common for pipeline systems of record, this is, you're no longer just capturing the current status of a pipeline and the location of it. You're segmenting it along the specifications that could flange in with TVC requirements. You're comparing it to consequences in class and structure, vicinity information. This does represent a large lift in a number of ways. OSAVE itself, and OSAVE is largely verifying attributes, right? Is it, if you were to say, okay, we have to just change the OSAVE process, you have to maybe point it to all these attributes in your data set. And are they there? Do they match with the domain inside of the NPMS PODS database? Yes or no? How do we do those lookups? It's tech, anytime you're talking about different materials and manufacturers, those lists that a company may maintain are long, hundreds of records sometimes. So there's, you know, the data cleanup while it goes through that submission process could be a lot of work.
Yeah, and we did act, well, the current proposal where we are right now is we published a 60-day Federal Register notice proposing the changes. Well, basically reproposing, for the most part, we reproposed what OMB approved in 2020. The exceptions to that is that we added 2 more attributes that came to us courtesy of the 2019 gas transmission final rule, the MCA, the medium consequence area, and the 192.710 assessment requirements, which are slightly different from the MCA definition. So we were proposing to add those 2 also for gas transmission. For the most part, the rest of the list is what OMB had approved in 2020, and the main thing we're doing is pushing out implementation for the reasons I talked about earlier. Because you're right, it is. We got radical. We got that. There's that word again. Radical increase in segmentation.
Yeah.
So
it's order of magnitude.
we as an agency need to decide how we're going to handle that in OSAVE, and then make those decisions in time to communicate with the industry so that you all are ready to meet the expectations.
And just for a magnitude of scale, and from some of the segmentation I've done in the past, you might have 10 to 15 segments per mile. So if the database that you are managing has 500,000 miles of assets, that's representing millions of new records in your system that need to be accessible, manageable, portable, you know, all this stuff. It's got to work. So it's a big hunk of data, right? And a lot of companies are doing this internally for risk and class calculation, MAOP calculation purposes. But a lot of these companies might operate 1,000 miles of pipe. Take that times 500, and now you're looking at a big set of data in the end. It's got to perform. You got to be able to open it up and look at it. I do see a note around LNG and breakout tanks. Do you have any comments on that? I don't know a tremendous amount about LNG.
Yeah, the LNG facilities have been reported through NPMS for years and years. But in addition to spatial data about where the facility is located, I'm sorry, the plant is the proper term. In addition to where the plant is located, there's also a requirement for some spatial data around exclusion zones, depending on the construction date or significant modification of your plant. Breakout tanks used to be optional, still are, but when the 2023 submittals come in during 2024, we're going to be expecting, just like your miles match your annual report, we're going to be expecting your breakout tank submittals to be matching your annual reports. And then the abandoned pipelines, Leigha touched on this earlier. At this point, if you abandon a pipeline, you can sort of just not report it. And then eventually we come back to you and figure out whether it was abandoned, whether you forgot it, whatever. The proposal to OMB is that abandoned pipeline submission would be required starting in calendar year 2023. So that would cut out, hopefully, some of that review and ask for feedback from the operator. Instead of just dropping segments that you abandoned, the information collection would require you to submit them with the abandoned revision code.
And if you were to combine abandoned pipelines that have been in the system for a while with new attributions, requirements, material, diameter, coded information, you got a historical records review that you have to do to potentially populate some. Not only do we know that it's abandoned, but we need to know some stuff about what is abandoned, how much pipe is in there. Something was abandoned 20 years ago. It might be hard to find some of that information now to match. And there's some Monique has been talking more and more with gas gathering companies, and I'll kind of open it up to everybody. So PODS itself is definitely appropriate for gas gathering. Where does everybody feel around these reporting and submittal processes for gathering? It's not quite there today. Is that correct?
Right. Currently, there are no requirements in the regs for gas gathering pipelines to be submitted to the NPMS.
Currently. Yeah, Monique's like, yeah.
Blaine, you're so good at what you do. Okay, guys, my screen is literally like, it's question after question. I think we may have 20 something questions now that have come in.
I didn't write any of them.
It's crazy. Like, so we only have 10 minutes left. I mean, what do y'all want to talk about something else? Do y'all want me to just?
No, I mean, I think that we were just waiting for you to tell us how many questions there were. And I know that, look, this is kind of the end of the meat. I know Monique has a couple other slides that she wants to maybe go over around what PODS is, but I would like to turn it back to Monique to get through some of those other housekeeping items, and then let's maybe go into the questions or whatever you feel like doing.
Sure. And we're gonna skip this last poll because I thought it was I came up with the third possibility. I thought it was pretty fun. So yeah. So real quick on PODS, like what Luke said is absolutely the case, right? So the 7.0.1 was built specifically around you can build anything on it now, right? It's literally geared and built up specifically to support the entire asset lifecycle. And we are rolling out new work groups right now for new modules, right? In 3 weeks, we're gonna have the ILI release party. So the ILI module's coming out. And then in October, the UNET, Utility Network PODS, is coming out. And then we're working on an integrity or regulatory task module and a construction module and everything. So the point I'm getting here is that this was, PODS was operator designed to comply with regulations, support specific pipeline operations, and then help to decrease risk through the digital twin. So with that transparency to that data. So if you're not involved with PODS yet, we really would enjoy growing our community even more, right, than we have previously. And if you're not using PODS for some of the things that we have going on, we'd love for you to come check us out and see what we have. We have a lot of data resources, a lot of, we have an education library and training resources. We're working on some additional training right now. We're going to be having some PODS parties as well. So please get involved if you can. And you'll see up on your screen right now some QR codes for the next couple of PODScasts that we have coming up. So please check those out as well. And I'm going to send a link to everybody to be able to register those. So the last slide I'm going to leave up because we're not going to be able to get to all these questions. So please feel free to reach out to Leigha and Blaine, but I am going to have a list of all these questions and share those with them and get some responses. So a couple of things was, the first thing was a few people asked when Leigha was still talking whether or not if somebody was going to go through the additional attributes. And I was like, literally, we're doing that on the next slide. So check, done. The next one is there a plan to provide eco data from NatureServe through NPMS again in the near future, or operators responsible for purchasing the data through NatureServe for current and future analysis?
I'd say the regulation doesn't say who spends the money. It says this is the definition of what is in Eco USA. Identify your segments, and PHMSA absolutely would like to help to provide resources to support the decision making. But be careful, even if or when PHMSA can hopefully find a more reasonable and agreeable option for acquiring data and providing it, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a solid one answer. This is not the definition, this is the data. So this is data that can help you in making those decisions. Trust me, a national database is not going to be as smart as what you know about your pipeline and the area around your right of way. It's a resource. It's not the answer. It's not the definition. It's just one mapping element that was created by one group to try to match the definition. So I want to hang my hat on any one data set anyway.
Well, so Leigha, a lot of what we know, right, is that it's not just important to know, and Jeff Weiss tells me this all the time, he always repeats this, you got to also know what's around your pipeline, not just to know what's in your pipeline, what's around your pipeline. And so Luke is our technical coordinator for PODS, and he's created a resource, we call it our data resource center, with a ton of free data layers that you can add into your system so that you can see a lot more about what's going on around your pipeline. And all of that is accessible free for all of the PODS members, right? So you can just log onto the portal and grab those too. So we have another question, and I'm going to try to run through a few of these. Why wouldn't NPMS just add a feature class submittal for class HCA, MCA data? Breaking these into such a segmented selection is going to be a challenge. And as Luke stated, could be millions of segments for submittals. And to add to this, why not just get additional feature class data sets for pipe info, pickable segments, etc.?
Okay. Well, I could say the first part of my answer is that never say never. We have some time built into the implementation workflows so that we can actually research the options for the best, most efficient way for you to create these data submissions, for us to process them, for us to store them, for us to disseminate them to our over 40,000 monthly users. So we're going to be getting into that process very shortly here. So it's something we'll be considering. The second part of my answer, I will say from experience, when you ask somebody to answer the same question twice, you always get a different answer both times. So if we say submit various feature classes with the different sets of attributes, we're also going to have to make sure that those various feature sets are spatially matching and that there's logical connections between what you're answering here, what you're answering there, what you're answering in annual reports. So it could also be one more place for issues to be introduced, especially if you happen to be one of those companies that's pulling this information from two different places. So it's going to put more burden on you to make sure that your two separate feature class submissions with the different segmentation are also matching rather than putting it all in one place. So never say never. We're going to look into it, and we're going to be looking for opportunities to accept different types of submittals, even LRS formatted submittals that might more go towards what you're talking about, that will really minimize the segmentation that's coming in for our center line and use more of a PODS type model and LRS type approach to your submittal rather than a shapefile segmented for every little thing.
LRS refers to as a linear referencing system, the APR tools. Right. When you say LRS, are you?
Oh, I'm sorry, linear referencing system.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Some of these pipeline company regulators may not know what linear referencing means.
Sure, go ask your PODS expert.
I know.
Yeah, Luke is my translator in a lot of situations. He'll break it down for me as well. So, okay, I have another one. Can you elaborate on the segmentation by pipe joint requirement?
By pipe joint requirement. So the join type.
Sorry, pipe join, not pipe joints. I need to put my glasses off.
Oh no, no, it's okay. The pipe join. So first of all, I always say Blaine looks at this data and he sees actual pipeline operations and he sees infrastructure. I look at it and I see pipeline, I see GIS data. So he could maybe elaborate a little bit more about how that operational, that construction situation plays into the data. I could say from a data perspective, that is one of the attributes we've identified as being required as predominant. This means that on the segment that you're submitting, the value that you provide must reflect 90% of the joins that exist on that segment. And so that's to allow operators a little bit of wiggle room when you have a little bit of a change in one area, but a longer segment that's all the same. It's to allow for a little bit of, maybe a little bit of unknown here or there where you're working on improving the data. So it is predominant. We also know that there are a number of values that are currently in the operator, the attribute standards, which you get from the NPMS website, and I think it's available. Monique has it available for all of you as well with the supplemental instructions. You can see in there the values that are in there. Those are values that PHMSA has been collecting and identified through various reporting systems over the years. But there's also an option for other, where if you have something different, you can give us a text description, and we'll be using those text descriptions as we go on to identify if, hey, maybe we need to be adding more values to the domain. I see it's 11 already, but I don't know if Blaine has anything operational to add to that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that we don't expect it to be a big impactor on segmentation, because 98% is going to be W, welded. We are very interested and in some cases concerned about pipe that's put together with couplings, that's screwed together, that's flanged, or that you don't know. So from a segmentation perspective, pipe join should have a minimal impact. But from a safety perspective, it could be a significant player.
Awesome. Yeah, and we are a minute over now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these questions to the panel and make sure that we can get everybody some answers, because there's a ton of great questions in here. So what that tells me is that this is something that we need to talk about more, right? And have more of these conversations, so that people have a good place where that they can go ask those questions and get some answers. Because when you ask a question, it's helpful not just to you, but to everybody else who felt like they couldn't answer it or ask the question, right? Because sometimes people don't feel like that they can. So with that, again, thank you so much to the over 120 of you that showed up for this podcast today. That's awesome. Oh my goodness.
People listening to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke, so much. Thank you, Blaine, and thank you, Leigha. Really appreciate you guys' time and walking us through all this stuff. And everybody, don't forget, you're going to get a survey as soon as we close out the podcast. And please give us some feedback and let us know what you want us to talk about next. And with that, we hope everybody has a wonderful day, and thank you so much.
Stay safe. Thanks, everyone.